So, Paul, let's move on and think about embedding coaching. And I can see here on the slide you've mentioned this model called the situated learning model by Lave and Wenger.
Wenger will do. Yes.
Fantastic. Do you want to say a bit about what it is and how you find it useful within the world of coaching?
Yes, I'll tell you how I interpret it. That's relevant to what we're talking about. So, yeah, the actual concept here, the model of situated learning, has been around for over 30 years, as you can see. And it was brought back to our attention by Ian Grayling, who's worked for the Education Training Foundation, and a really good mentor to a lot of advanced practitioners over the years. And in one of the AP booklets that Ian brought out as part of the ETF sort of suite of resources for APs, I think it was 2017, 18, then he really sort of brought this back to our attention, really. And as I understand it, and we talked about this, about coming alongside and developing the individual. And I think that's great. But this model is, we are situated in our practice with colleagues and peers. And I think teaching is a very lonely, isolated process at times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best way to develop the individual is to develop them within the team. So team effectiveness. So you talked a little bit about working with teams and course teams. I think that's so important. You can work with individuals, and that's absolutely fine. Working collaboratively in their course or program teams or departments is really powerful. And it gives the individual a sense of responsibility, because what they have to do is watch the back of their colleagues and vice versa. And it's a team effort to improve practice and performance. This is what Ian's talking about. It's a greater responsibility for collective performance. So great coaching conversations in a round, if you like, in a group of 4, 5, or 6 of business teachers or hairdressing and beauty teachers, so they don't feel isolated in their practice. That's sharing what they do well and working together about improving practice, and it's empowering teams. And if you empower the team, then the individual is drawn into that rather than a collection of individuals that you're working with. That's really what situated learning is all about, that we as an individual teacher are situated within a wider context of working with our peers and other colleagues, professional colleagues. And that is a really powerful tool, is to develop as a whole collectively rather than just a group of individuals.
And there's an interesting crossover there with the notion of subject specialism, dual vocational practice, if you like, that we have people who are focused on their own professional development as teachers pedagogically, but also everybody has a specialism in terms of subject from their original profession in the sector. So being able to have conversations rooted in that reality, I think these things can be really rich, they can be really thought-provoking, they can be really practical in terms of implementing, because you're working within that context where you are every day with those colleagues that you see in the workroom, that you maybe co-deliver with, that you go do assessments with. So there's real power in it being situated in that space together. It links also with the work around supported experiments. When people are doing supported experiments, experimenting in teams around things that are emerging as needs for that area, we have that similar feeling of we're all in it together, trying to improve that for our cohorts, which I think is really motivating for teachers too.
It sort of mirrors the sort of the action learning set model as well, when you're working in 2s, 3s, rather than individually. And I think when that works well, it works fantastically well. And just learning off each other, because we've all got different skill sets, different knowledge, skills, abilities, attributes, and let's share it. And I think this way of embedding culture in an organisation actually spreads the good news quicker, rather than working with individuals all the time.
Stops the silo, helps the ripple, which is what we like.
Yeah.
How have you used this model? Is it something you're using? Is it underpinning the thinking of the conversations that the APs are having with people? Is it explicitly out there as a set of stages, process steps? How are you actually harnessing it?
It hasn't been easy, obviously, because of the lockdowns and last couple of years, but certainly before that period, working in course teams was a big part of the coaching model that I was implementing. And yes, and it saves time for you as the coach. So don't work with one person for half an hour and another person for half an hour. Bring them all together as a team of 5 in an hour, and you'll get far more done than individual coaching. So when time is short, and it's precious, if you can get your course teams together, and again, this is the time and space issue that we talked about, which is a challenge. If you've got that time and space to bring teams together, it's far more cost effective and time effective in the long run.
And people can spark ideas off each other, they can share and swap, it can do some troubleshooting or some problem solving, some creative reflective thinking. All of those things are possible when you've got a little bit of time allocated, and that's where the leaders, curriculum level leaders and above, come in terms of resourcing that time and enabling that timetable space to happen. Okay, that sounds like an interesting one, and maybe we'll see if we can find a link around that, Paul, that we can share on the website as well afterwards, so people can have a look into that in more depth.
Fantastic, yeah.
Another really interesting slide here about coaching culture and transformational change. So talk us through your thinking around this.
Okay, this was a little model that I put together. It was the AP conference that was meant to be in Birmingham a few years ago. Obviously, it didn't happen live, but it happened online. And I was just presenting this idea of using AP, advanced practitioner teams or teacher learning coaches to support whole college or whole school transformational change and embedding a coaching culture. And we talked earlier about the importance of senior leadership advocacy, buy-in. That's the baseline of my model, and that's the first step.
And it's huge. Look,
and it's the big step. Yeah, it's very Maslow-esque. I know this and with the colours.
Liking and
that. Yeah. Anyway, we'll start with senior leaders at the bottom of the pile, and so important to get their buy-in and have those really powerful conversations about this is what we'd like to do. It's a strategic commitment for this college. And we need the resources to be put in place, and we need to know that you are committed, whether it's 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, review it after a year and see how we go. Get that buy-in so everybody's on the same page. If you can get that, it might not be perfect, but it's a great start. The second stage is having that person or one or two people in the organisation who are the real driving agents of change. So it could be a lead subject learning coach, it could be a lead advanced practitioner, it could be a head of teaching and learning. But that person, whoever it is, has got to have a role which has position and influence in the organisation. And that influence may mean they need to sit at the top table from time to time to make sure that senior leaders are well informed of what's going on in terms of monitoring and progress. So it's not just having a head of teacher and learning that drives this process, who believes in coaching, it's their position in the organisation and the influence that they have on the senior leadership team. Once you've got that in place, then you start to embed coaching and mentoring into your curriculum planning process, into your timetabling process. So it's very important within your timetabling structure to have that time and space for colleagues to meet together in safe spaces. And that's always a challenge. And the bigger the organisation, the more complex the timetabling gets and all the different pressures that come on with that. But the best models are where you have sections of the week, of the working week, where majority of your teaching workforce can meet up together and collaborate and coach and mentor. And that's embedded into the curriculum planning process. And your CPD program has got to fit into that. So your CPD program has got to embed coaching and mentoring within it. It's part of it, it's sustained, and there's always be sort of stepping stones throughout the year. And it might be every 3 or 4 weeks that there is something going on that really promotes coaching and mentoring across the organisation. Just to remind everybody that it's there and it's not going away. The team to do that on the ground, and I always call it on the ground team, the coalface team is our advanced practitioner team. And whatever that team is, whatever they're called, they've got to have the right remit. They've got to have realistic remission away from their teaching practice hours, and they have got to have recognition. So those 3 things: a realistic remit with clear objectives of what they're setting out to do. They've got to have the right remission and time to do it, and they've got to be recognised and valued by the whole college learning community. Then you can start thinking about impact. And once you've got those 4 stages in place, then the impact tends to come through relatively quickly. And the impact is looking at individual development. It's looking at improvements in teaching practice, of course. There might be We talk about the deficit model of using advanced practitioners where teachers do need support because they're struggling, and that's absolutely fine. It's far more effective most of the time to actually support a struggling teacher and turn them around and let them go and try and find someone else. So again, that's I think, a really cost efficient way of running your organization. So the impact can be measured in a number of ways. As we mentioned before, it doesn't have to be numbers, but it can be about how many people are being touched and actually developed by this process. Is it across the board? Is it an inclusive process? Has everybody got access to coaching support across the organisation? So, for instance, we've got courses with adult learning community courses at the moment. So you've got staff who come in for maybe one session a week, and they shouldn't be left out. So one of my advanced practitioners is very much assigned to all our adult tutors who come in, and he works with them, he gives them value, he basically works alongside them in terms of their practice and evaluation. A lot of them are short courses, but they feel valued. They're not left out of the process. And there's a lot of teachers, especially sessionals, who come in, who are on the periphery of what we're trying to do and trying to make this process inclusive. It's another challenge, and you need the resource to be able to do that.
But it is so important, as you said, because otherwise you're just saying my full-time staff are the ones I professionally value and I'm prepared to invest in, actually. So I feel like part-time staff who are off-site, staff who teach sessional things, they're affecting students, they're part of our organisation, we need to develop them. I'm totally with you. Paul, I have to say, I totally love your triangle. I think it is, thinking about my experience in the last 30 years, because like you, I've been around a while, I would say this really echoes what I see in terms of the fundamental importance of having the strategy and the leadership support, but then the nature of different layers of operational steering, guiding and resourcing happening to really, really bring this to life. So I think that's a really insightful triangle that I think other people will be taking away from this and discussing with colleagues, I suspect. So thinking about the role of a coach then, and this is an interesting one, and thinking around this has been moving, I think, in the last few years. So what insights can you share about crafting the coaching role in an FE context? Because I don't think this is one thing, and I don't think it's fixed.
Oh, I just love this question because I love the word crafting. It's a skill. It's a developing skill. It's through trial and error and experimental experiences that you have as a coach. It is a craft because you have to shape those skills around whatever the demand is, whatever the need is. And it's never going to be the same for individuals, different organisations and teams. So it is definitely a craft. But one key insight, referring back to my previous slide, is this combination of factors that you need to balance up in your organisation for coaching to really have impact and meaning. And it's the people. It's the people that are the agents of change, not processes or structures or systems, etc. So it's getting the right people in place to drive the agenda, and that's really paramount in my experience. And it could be a principal who is one of those agents of change. It could be your human resource manager. It could be your head of teacher learning. It could be anybody, but those people who are really buying into the process are the key people. They're key drivers, as well as, of course, the coaches themselves on the ground.
The coaching teams that you've put together, what have you noticed about mindset and skill set of the people in those teams? When you're trying to recruit, what are you looking for, or what are you bearing in mind? Because I think that's a really tricky question for many people.
It's a really tricky question, and I've tried to encapsulate that in the points here. Obviously, the early focus, and this was led by many of us actually, saying, well, let's look at our outstanding teachers, whatever that means, because it's very subjective what we actually mean here, and maybe use them in the role. They've already got credibility with their peers. They've got credibility with management. So it's easier for buy-in to actually say, yeah, here's our team of outstanding teachers in the college, and we are going to use them as advanced practitioners. And that is fine. But what I realized quite quickly is just because they're an outstanding teacher in their own right doesn't make them a particularly effective coach. The two things don't correlate. And actually, you've got some teachers who are struggling a little bit because they're struggling a little bit. for whatever reason, it's actually because they're highly reflective. They
Yes.
actually have that empathy and sympathy with their colleagues who are also maybe struggling a little bit, and actually those conversations become more meaningful. And you get, and it's the conversation that we normally have, Joe. Is it mentoring or is it coaching? And it's this spectrum, isn't it? And I think in the early days there was a lot of mentoring that went on, which was quite hierarchical, and that was fine. We were working through these processes. But now, for me, my team of advanced practitioners, my coaches, have got to have particular qualities. Of course, they're really good practitioners. They're confident practitioners. But I don't use grades, anyway, so I can't call them ones or twos or outstanding or whatever. They are very competent, confident, respected teachers. And they want to give this a go, but what are the qualities I'm really looking for are aligned to Roger's core conditions here. They've got to be genuineness. So when they're talking to somebody, they've got to come across as they are genuinely interested in the coachee, the person they're talking to. And that comes across in how their body language and everything. They have real empathy. So there's no judgment. There's no judgment there. I empathize with the story that you are telling me. I understand where you are coming from. It's a great starting point. An unconditional positive regard. And it's just that I'm not, it doesn't matter what you tell me, I've got a really positive attitude that we are going to move forward here together. It's unconditional. This relationship is unconditional. We're going to work together. It's going to be very positive, and it's going to be a positive outcome. And it's those attributes that I'm looking for my coaches, and they seem to be the people who really get the best out of their colleagues.
And interestingly, people who I've seen who have those characteristics as humans, they often respond really well to training on coaching. They respond to training on reflective dialogue. They pick up skills because they're really interested in working well with others, making the connection, motivating people to improve practice. They're coming at it from genuineness, empathy, and unconditional positive regard. So I think I'm with you in that you can train up a lot of the skills. You can give them the toolkit. But if their initial response to another human doesn't create that kind of space, we won't get trusting, safe situations where people will want to open up, will feel that their coach wants to work with them as opposed to clone themselves. So I think I'm really with you on that we do need the type of person first, and then we can develop the skill set afterwards.
Yeah, that helps a lot of the time. It can work the other way around, and people can develop these attributes as well. But they 9 times out of 10, you need those personal attributes as a foundation of your coaching practice. Otherwise, it's just not going to work.
I think it's an easier growth almost that way round than the other way round, because it's about instinctive. It's almost like what would come into your mind, what will come out of your mouth is coming from what kind of human you are, really.
Yeah.
And I think
that genuineness is so important, because if you sit down with a teacher who's quite cynical for whatever reason, they need to feel that the person sitting with them is genuinely interested in them.
Yes, and not judging that viewpoint and not judging their perspective and not saying, come along, be like this, be like me.
Stiff upper lip, get on with it.
Keen, enthusiastic youngster like I am. No, we need much more empathy than that, and a much more sophisticated skill set around the emotional side, I think. So when you're supporting and developing them in a coaching team, what have you noticed is helpful here?
As I put here, I think it's a regular sort of light touch supervision approach. And just trying to make sure that they feel that they're not isolated as advanced practitioners, because you can take a lot on board, you can take a lot on your shoulders. And I think in particular the last 18 months, a lot of advanced practitioners have really felt the weight and the burden of what they have to do to support staff, particularly with the mental health and well-being and work overload situation. So I think it's really important just to reassure your coaching team that it's okay, that try not to take things personally, try not to build up that anxiousness inside yourself. You cannot change the world. You're just trying to help somebody help themselves. And even if you move a couple of inches, a couple of steps, you've made progress. So that's sort of one message that I try to maintain. just to share experiences and getting the coaches together. Again, that hasn't been easy this year, everything that's going on. And lots of staff being off sick as well, and the cover that's the impact of that. But my job is just to make sure to give them that time and space. I'm the agent of change for them. I'm there, the person who is facilitating their experience as an advanced practitioner. So that's my job. That's what I can do for them. And I think, I'm always working, how can we embed that time and space into the timetable? How can we move forward so there's those opportunities to meet as many teachers in the learning community as possible across the academic year, and all the different ways in which we can do that, even if it's a 15-minute quick chat, is better than no chat at all.
Totally.
And it's being flexible. And I think I've moved away from the ideal situation that a coaching experience has to be quite formalized, quite structured, has to be in this particular coaching room. It has to last for a minimum of 30 minutes. And you need to go through steps A, B, C, and D before you both walk out the door. You've got to be more open to that, and I've had to adopt and adapt different models and different expectations. And I think, a risk-free ethos is what I put at the bottom there. Just practice, go out and practice, do your very best you possibly can. Whatever you do, you are benefiting others, whatever you can manage to do. It doesn't matter if you can't quite get it right.
And that notion of maybe quick 10-15-minute chats, I think in the pandemic, I've seen people have to really freestyle, and they've come up with new ways of working. They're doing quick Skype calls, a quick Zoom chat, a quick bit of work online asynchronously where people maybe post questions and thoughts and ideas and throw resources in. And I think all of this is great and on the table, and let's do it, because we're working in such difficult environments for time that anywhere where we can provoke a bit of thought, get a bit of dialogue going, I'm up for that. I'm totally up for that. Can I ask you, I really like the idea that you treat the group as a team, and that you're thinking about the notion of pulling them together. I think this group, sometimes they don't necessarily have time allocated to work together as an AP or coaching team. And that is a problem in terms of both their reflection, their supervision, and their sharing of practice. Your kind of supervision approach, what is that? Is that one-to-one meetings with them? Is it them as a group and you fostering reflective dialogue? How does that work?
I think getting them together is another challenge, and I'm working that for next year in my current college, and I think we'll move into that space and time element next year, which will improve the situation tremendously. It's probably a one-to-one every half term, face-to-face, and I try and get it face-to-face. But we've got the online option as well now, so quick callings, quick touching base. How are you doing this week? Is there anything you want to talk about? And supervision is just about letting the coach just talk about their experience, and if they're worried about anything, I've got this person who I'm working with and I'm not sure what to do next. And it's just a sharing of ideas and bouncing ideas off each other. So they don't feel that they're working in isolation. I think this will get easier as we embed these models back into colleges after a sort of couple of years of hit and miss. And I think this will get better, and certainly my personal experience here, really looking forward to next year, where we're putting things back into place as they were pre-pandemic.
It's really interesting. I've been doing quite a lot of work with pairs of coaches. So getting a coach to coach another coach, and then me watching and giving feedback on Zoom, which has proved to be actually really exciting, just a new way of working with people, just to allow for individual development. But I say to them, bring me a real challenge from the coaching or the AP role that you have. And I'm really seeing that people, they want the reassurance of somebody else's views in their coaching conversation about that situation. They are feeling uncertain or insecure sometimes about something, or they're not quite clear. They need to think it out and talk it out with another coach, thinking about it from the staff development angle, from the motivation angle, from all these kinds of different positions, the quality angle, relationships with managers. And it's really useful for them to have that time and space. So I think I'd really support that for people, making time for them to have regular work together as a group, but then also regular conversations with their leader, if you like, as a space to really surface whatever's really fresh in their mind at that point.
There's been a lot of barriers, lots of frustrations. At the moment, my advanced practitioners are writing this sort of yearly reviews, and you can expect some of the things that are coming back that have been frustrating. Working with a member of staff, and they've been off sick for a while, then they come back, and then lots of staff changes. But yeah, we're looking forward to a little bit of normality next year.
Excellent.